Good to be back. It's good to see new faces too. Good to have our visitors in the house with us this morning. And our fearless rabbi is still in the land, and he's coming back in the next few days. And so he's going to have to deal with what we're dealing with right now with the jet lag and all that kind of stuff in the next few days. So right now I'm still on a high. I woke up this morning not quite on Israeli time, but I woke up at 3 a.m. just 7 hours ahead. So I guess I got to sleep till 10 a.m. In theory, in theory. So I'm going to share with you today. Just if you want to put that little, I don't know if I even brought it in the screen for the name of the teaching or message or what I'm going to share today. Just lessons from the land. Many of you guys know that we took a group of 40, how many did we end up have total? 41? Yeah. 41 people to the land of Israel. We were in the land of Israel for these last 2 weeks. We got in yesterday evening. Some people got in late last night. Some people are still trying to get home. We got a few that are still here with us today, and it's good to have them in service with us today. But this was a special time. Let me just call out some things here for you. See if any of these ring a bell. Caesarea, Mount Carmel, Mount Tabor, Mount Hermon, the Jezreel Valley, Megiddo, the Sea of Galilee, Capernaum, Magdala, Mount of Olives, the Kotel or the Western Wall, En-Gedi, Masada, the Dead Sea. All those ring a bell? What do all these places have in common? They're all part of the history of a nation and a people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And these places, this land that we call Israel, testifies to the fulfillment of the promises God gave to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And that's what I really want to share about today is just how our trip is one of those things that if you haven't gone to Israel, you need to do. You need to make it a goal in your lifetime to go to Israel because it will change your life in some capacity, some shape, form, or fashion. Rabbi had asked me if I wanted to share something about the trip, of course, and he said specifically from your perspective as a Messianic, and not only just a Messianic, but a Messianic Gentile. So those of you who do not know me, I am not Jewish. Our rabbi is, his family, and several others in our congregation. But, I come from a different perspective, like probably most of you in this room. We come from a non-Jewish background and perspective. And this land, it can have different meanings to different people. And so I'm going to be exploring some of those meanings and what they meant to us, and hopefully what you can learn about connecting with Israel, about the people, the land, the heritage, the history, the present day reality, and the future reality of Israel and its meaning. We had a great group. We had a diverse group of people. We had a large group of different people we had people from our congregation primarily, but you know what? We had people that actually weren't even part of our congregation that came, that were connected to our congregation in some capacity. We had people from here in Macon. We had people from out of state, many other states that came with us. Some of these people we didn't really know. We had to get to know. And so through this, we learned to overcome obstacles. We learned about creating new connections with people that we didn't know. We learned how to strengthen our connections to one another that we did know. And we got to spend a great amount of time with each other and getting to know each other better. But, part of the focus of what we're doing is that we were learning about how to connect with the land and the people of Israel. Our tour, our specific tour, hit at a really cool time because we got there and we got to be a part of certain special moments in time that were during this trip. And we actually got in on what's called Yom HaShoah. That's the Holocaust Remembrance or Memorial Day. Okay, that's the day that we got in on and got to see some observances and different things of that. You go in the airport even, everywhere, and it's Yom HaShoah, and they've got these displays up, and there are candles lit and different things, remembering those who were killed in the Holocaust. And then we also got to celebrate Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the new month, and it was on the last Sabbath, and got to go to a synagogue, the great synagogue there, and hear some special parts of the liturgy that was really great. And Lance, I know you were just, I could feel that jealousy, even though I was trying to enjoy it. And I was like, man, Lance needs to be here. But we had a world-class cantor there leading the service that he's sought after and different things, and it was phenomenal connection there. So we got to experience Rosh Chodesh. We got to experience a few days later Yom HaZikaron, which is their version of Memorial Day, and it remembers not only the fallen soldiers, but those killed by terrorist attacks and different things like that. We also got to experience the following day, Yom HaAtzmaut, if I can say that right. I think I got it right. Yom HaAtzmaut. There we go. And so this is the Israeli Independence Day. This is their 4th of July, so to speak. But unlike our 4th of July, which is 200-something years removed, theirs is only 75 years removed. And this is a special thing because we got to celebrate Israel's 75th anniversary of their becoming a nation, right? Very, very special. And so unlike ours, we just sort of go shoot fireworks and we, grill out or whatever. Fireworks are illegal, by the way, unless done by the government in Israel. But the focus is on this special program. All the channels in Israel go to this one program, and that is the remembrance of everything that has taken place, for the formation of Israel and the people that have given their lives, the people that have contributed to the welfare of Israel, the development of Israel over the years. People have given significant contributions to who Israel is as a country, and we can talk about all the different things like that. But we got to experience those three things, and I want to sort of connect these different things with the stuff that we did in three categories, like I said earlier. I want to connect the three aspects of Israel: the past, the present, and the future. Okay? And if you'll hit photo number 1 for me, Blake. On the first day that we got there, this is one of the places that we got to visit that really meant a lot to us. So for those of you who don't know, many years ago, back in 2002, I got to visit Israel for the first time, and the only time since this last trip. So 21 years ago, I got to experience an archaeological dig. And from that point on, I was hooked. And I wouldn't say I've become an armchair archaeologist because I haven't kept up with that much in the last several years. But after I did that dig in 2002, I kept up with it quite a bit. But this is a typical site similar to what we would have been digging in. And this is a meaningful place because this is one of the only first century synagogues they've ever found, especially in the area of the Galilee. This is Magdala, okay? And what's really great about this is most likely, because it's first century, because it's in the Galilee, it is one of the few places that we can have a fair certainty that Yeshua would have taught in when he was walking this earth. Isn't that really cool? So this is a first century synagogue at Magdala, and if you'll do that next slide for me, this is basically this right here. This is the bema, okay? And so this is where the Torah scroll would have been set. And supposedly, I don't know how they're getting this, but supposedly the Torah scroll, instead of sitting on it like we do here, we put it down like this, the Torah scroll would have been stood up and held or something, or putting in little things to hold it up while it was being read. I'm not sure if that's the case. I don't know how that worked, but this was it. It had some interesting things, and this is one of the earliest depictions we have of a menorah, too, I believe. that we have this looking like the depictions we see later on as well, like the relief of Titus and different things like that. And so that was a really neat experience. We had a great connection there, knowing that our Master Yeshua most likely had taught in that synagogue, or at least attended. Next, if you want to turn the photo to photo 3, we have this place called Masada. And so you see here, we are getting in the cable car, the gondola, to go up to the very top of Masada there. And there's a whole city that was up there, okay? And there's remnants of it. And it is a big trek. There's a path that you can take, the snake path. You can hike up if you would like. It takes about an hour or something like that. To get up that path, we decided to go the easy route. As you can tell, it's quite the trek. And so this is another aspect connecting to the past. Masada was the last stand for the Jews against the Romans when the first temple fell. The second temple fell in the first century. That's what I meant to say. For the first Jewish revolt. Whereas the Jerusalem fell in 70 AD, Masada held out for another 3.5 years. Okay? They hold themselves up here, 960 Jewish men, women, and children, hold themselves up in this place in defiance of the Romans, and lasted for another several years. And unfortunately, that ended in tragedy as well. Then we have next photo number 4. Who knows what this is that didn't go on the trip? What? Qumran, there we go. Okay, Qumran Caves. So this is cave number 4 of Qumran. The Qumran is where we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and which are huge. They're one of the most significant archaeological finds in this last millennia. Okay, just about. It's huge. Definitely in the last 150 years. And this is where the Dead Sea Scrolls are found, and there's a lot of debate about the origins and different things about those. I have several books on those if you'd like to learn more about those. But basically, one of the big things that we learn from this is that our Bible, that the oldest Bible that we had in the Hebrew Scriptures before Qumran was from about 1000 AD. The copies of the Bible they found that from these caves are 1,000 years older than those, and it's still the same. There's some minor differences and little spellings and different things like that, but 99.5% of it or whatever is exactly the same. And so we can trust that the Word of God is true. Next, if you'll just play this while I talk, this number 5. This is a little video. I'm not doing the sound on this at all, but as you can see, I was going very quickly to video these things. It's basically this huge maze, and when it gets through, you may want to play it again, but it's a huge maze. It's a labyrinth that you walk through, okay? And it has all of these names of these communities engraved into the stone. From Europe during the Holocaust. These are the names of communities that the Jews were wiped out in by Nazi Germany and the Nazi regime. Okay? This is one section of it. There's about 30 sections. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Okay? These walls are probably, how tall are the walls, do you think?
About 50 foot.
Yeah, I was about to say 40, 50 feet at least. And they go on and on and on. You can get lost in there, okay? And it's made to be a labyrinth. It's made to be sort of confusing. They say if you get above it and look down, it's made in the shape of Europe, okay, to represent this. It's a very, very meaningful, very deep connection there. Our tour guide at that point, he stopped us and told us, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but he told us the story of his family and how his family was from Poland, and just about everybody in his family was killed by the Nazis. His father escaped, and I think one of his uncles and some other distant relatives, but that was it. But all of his immediate, family was killed and murdered by the Nazis. And he is included, his town and different things are in his community is included in these. He wrote a book to chronicle all of this. I think Sabrina's going to talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But and he told us his story while we were sitting at this place. We stopped at one point, and the rabbi stopped. He played a song. Sabrina will explain what the significance of part of this is. There is a very meaningful moment, and it just hit home how that we cannot be isolated. We cannot be distant. We cannot say, I'm not my brother's keeper. Okay? We are our brother's keeper. And especially our Jewish brothers that God has chosen. And so we need to be we need to be vigilant about what happens to Israel, to the Jewish people, and be part of the guard for that. If you'll turn to number 6, this is what we found as we were leaving Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. I'm going to let our congregants look at that for just a minute, see if you make any connections. We were visiting the Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Yad Vashem. And if you ever do that, by the way, I guess you can go with the tour, that's fine, but you really need about 7 hours to get through it because there's just so much stuff to go through and let it sink in. But this right here is a memorial stone, and it's big. It's like from that side of the podium to right here, and about that tall, okay? And I've got another picture with Sabrina and I standing on either side of it. But this says, the Jerusalem panorama, the name of the Lord is a fortified tower, the righteous run into it and are safe, Proverbs 18:10. Dedicated in memory of our beloved parents, Gilbert and Beverly Jane Held. Look back there at that board. That yard site board, that memorial board, it was dedicated by Gil to, no, this one, it was dedicated by Gil to his wife when she passed away. And then when he passed away, his children, their children, dedicated this to them at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. In Israel. So, yeah, it is in Jerusalem. So that's amazing. We were going out, and Sabrina was walking. She was trying to find Corrie ten Boom. There's the memorial for the righteous Gentiles. We're trying to find that, and she's looking, and she's walking by, and she goes, "Oh, Held." I said, "That we have, Held. That's a familiar last name." She starts reading it, and we're like, "Whoa, whoa!" We had no clue that they had done this, and so we have, in a way, a connection. Our congregation in Jerusalem. So it's beautiful, beautiful. We visited a community, actually a large area that has multiple communities called Gush Etzion. And to me, this is one of the most emotional connections that I had with Israel and with the Jewish people. That and this a place that I'd seen before. And this is, I don't have a photo for this, Blake, but this was, I thought I did, but I must have left it out. But this, excuse me, this was pretty incredible. They had a video that you would sit down and you'd watch part of a video, and it told this story. It was almost like a little movie that told this story about these young adults and that had evidently lost their parents somehow. We're trying to figure out how, and they were trying to rediscover what actually happened to their parents, if their parents actually cared about them, and all this kind of stuff. And reenacted this whole story about how this community was founded. And they were basically the last holdout against the Syrian army before they overran the Jewish settlers before Israel became a nation. Is that right? Am I getting my facts straight? Yes. Okay. And it ended with basically these people holding out. Some of them sent their wives and their children away so they wouldn't have to deal with this stuff. They sent them to a community further in, but they were on the line holding out to be the last defense. And Gush Etzion actually fell. And everybody died. And the people that were the last holdouts, they were in a building, and the Syrians threw in a grenade and wiped out the last of them. And as it's telling you the story and showing you what happened, the screen actually lifts up, and right there in the ground is that building that they were killed in. They had a cutaway of it where they actually had died. And it's very, very powerful. But this community became, the children of this community came back years later and rebuilt and flourished. And now that's a thriving community with many, many communities built in this area. And beautiful thing. And so our tour guide, he was actually part of this community and had connections this way. So next one is a familiar picture. You've probably all seen this. Is 12, number 12. Next one, I think. There you go. And this is the Kotel. This is a picture I took. This is the western wall called the Kotel. And this is actually, a lot of people think of this as the part of the temple. It's actually not part of the temple. It's actually just a retaining wall for the Temple Mount, okay? But that's one of the closest places that we can get to where the Holy of Holies would have been and be able to pray. And this was a special time for me to go, and I know several others. Me and Eric went a few times together and pray, and you can see the connection there with the past, how the past, we see remnants of the past, but yet we still have part of it. We have a connection to it. And it's one of the central places that's very meaningful for people all over the world to go to today. As far as the present goes, you can go back one slide that we did just a moment ago. This is the Brahm Center.
Darren, can
yes.
I say something real
sure.
quick? Now, on Mighty Networks, a lot of people had put prayer requests
Oh, yes.
on there for us to put in the Wailing Wall, and Elizabeth wrote down each prayer request on an individual piece of paper, and we all as a group took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we just grabbed some and read each person's name and said a prayer for them, and then put their prayer request in the wall.
Okay, I'm going to sort of repeat that for people on the video that didn't hear that online. So we, through our Shalom at Home network, took in prayer requests, and we wrote those out. Elizabeth was the one that wrote those out, and we took those prayer requests in little pieces of paper, and people grabbed those and took them to the wall when they were praying. We prayed over each one of those. And so that was a very special time as well. And so if you haven't been connected or contacted by people that have prayed over your prayers, if you sent in prayers, you will be shortly. Speaking of the present, Israel has a lot of things going on right now. They are thriving in many ways. They have tourism, of course. We were a part of that. They have high-tech businesses. For instance, we saw this one place that was a row of high-tech businesses in these long buildings that were like metal buildings, right? They used to be chicken coops. Israel has turned their agriculture in that area to high-tech industry, right? They're an agricultural wonder of the world. They can make anything grow, right? We saw hordes and hordes and hordes of banana trees, of mango trees, avocado trees, of date palms, what else? Oranges, cherries, yeah. Juju apples. What?
Lemons.
Yeah, lemons, all kinds of things, right? Everywhere. They have they're thriving in their social activity. There's stuff going on everywhere. Nighttime, it's active and everything. Unfortunately, to the point of decadence in many areas. Israel's like anybody else; they're human, and so when you have a lot of freedom, when you have a lot of wealth and prosperity, you're going to go into a dark place as well. This place right here, this is the wall. I don't know if you can sort of tell what's going on, but this is a wall wallpaper on the inside of a room, and there's a table right there with the chair, and there's several chairs around this table. But this is called the Brahm Center, and First Fruits of Zion operates this, and this is where they're sort of operating out of with the sort of the mandate. The Torah will go forth from Jerusalem, right? And so they have this place on the 11th floor of a high-rise building in the downtown Jerusalem that they host Torah studies and guest speakers and introducing people to concepts of Messianic Judaism, and bring in secular people, bring in ultra-Orthodox people to study, and everybody gets along, okay? Just, it works from all over the place. So they have these classes and different things that they do all the time that goes through this. So this is an amazing opportunity that we have to connect with Israel, with Jerusalem specifically. Brahm Center run by First Fruits of Zion. A lot of us have become supporters of First Fruits and help them to get that space. It's very expensive, as you can imagine, especially downtown Israel. And one of the weird things about Israeli, like this is a building, this is a set of offices inside a high-rise apartment. Well, we would say we would, lease or rent those, right? They actually can buy them. It's the same way with like apartments and things like that. You buy your apartment. It's weird. It's a weird thing. And then you sell your apartment when you leave, and you move elsewhere. But I want to ask Sabrina if you'll start making your way up here, sweetheart, my wife Sabrina, to share a little bit about the connections that that was made for her, specifically in regard to a couple of different places and something that happened. I'm going to step down for that. Okay?
Shabbat Shalom. I did want to speak about a few highlights before I get into two different stories I wanted to share. First, it was very, very much a blessing to get to go with Rabbi Damien and Kelly. I know they've wanted to do this trip for years. It was planned originally 2020, and then COVID hit, and it's just been put off and put off. So the Lord opened the door for us to be able to go this year, and I'm very thankful that we had them to take us. And of course, the guide that they knew, Shlomo, Ben Asher is his name. They used him before, but it had been about 10 years since they had seen him and gotten to do a tour with him. So it was phenomenal that we got to have him as our guide. It was every day it felt like the Lord, you just saw the blessing that we were a special group, we had a special tour guide, and special things happened. And I'm going to share one of those that Darren wanted me to share. And I think there was not a dry eye on the day that this particular thing happened. But other highlight, I just want to say a few highlights for me personally. Again, Darren said, getting to form our relationships, get to know new people, and strengthen old relationships and make them stronger. And just to see the variety of the group. We had some people go that had physical challenges, and it's not easy to do a tour of Israel. It's taxing. It is difficult. You are drained physically, emotionally, mentally. Your soul, on the other hand, is just thriving. It's like your soul is alive in a different way and full, but your body, you're just wearing your body out with it all. And we had some ladies that just pushed through and overcame their obstacles, and it was neat to see us pull together and encourage one another through different times where they needed help. And So that was a beautiful thing to see happen. Okay. Real quick, we had a driver. His name was David. So that's another very important thing, is to have a skilled, knowledgeable, experienced driver in the land of Israel, especially when you get into Jerusalem. That is, it's the capital of the country, right? And it's huge, it's lots of people, and everything is tight and small. Everything's small. Because they got to fit so much into such a small amount of land, right? And so we're cutting corners. We'll pass another tour bus literally within an inch, maybe 2 inches. But if my window was down, I could just touch this other, it's crazy. But it was so, we felt very safe, and there were a few times we were kind of like, you're just hoping these other cars are going to stop because you're in the middle. We're in a tour bus, a charter bus, making a U-turn in the middle of the road. It's just unbelievable. So, but again, the Lord's blessing was with us. And how do we share? How do we? Hopefully, the joy, the everything that's in us will pour out, since our cups are full, as we share a few more things before we depart today. 2 things I wanted to share. Our guide Shlomo, his family came from Poland, from the Vilna area. And his father was one of several children, I forget how many, but his father decided to make Aliyah, which means to return to the land of Israel. And so his father had already made Aliyah before the war started in Europe. So his family, his father and descendants were saved, if you will. They were kept safe. They weren't exposed to any of that. But the rest of the family that stayed back were, and they were mostly wiped out. And when we were in the remembrance of the communities, this maze-like place, like Darren showed you, and we got to this open area, enough room to sit down and for him to share his story. He showed us some pictures. He was carrying his book that he wrote. He took about a year of his life. He felt like it was an obligation, but a privilege and an obligation to tell his family's story. So he took a year out of his life to research. He researched at Yad Vashem because they have the most extensive records that there are, photos, papers, documents, to document people's lives that were lost in the Holocaust. He researched, found as much information as he could there. He went to Europe and researched there, did interviews, and wrote a book about this. Am I upside down? Thank you. Anyway, it's called Legacy Interrupted by Shlomo ben Asher. And he had the book in his hand, and he does tours, right? He's a tour guide, so it was a worn book. It was taped, and it's his thing that he took around with him when he talked about this part. And so he was sharing his story, and when he was finished, Rabbi Damien, he took his guitar, Rabbi Damien did, every day. At one point, every day, there was some point where he would break it out, and we would sing a song or two. So those were always special times. And this time, he played a song that we've never heard. He specifically wrote, after his first trip to Israel and first trip to Yad Vashem, he wrote this song. And he was going to play it, and he got out his guitar. And as you know, when you travel with a stringed instrument, it doesn't stay in tune. You have to retune it every time you bring it out. So he was retuning and retuning and retuning and retuning and retuning. It just would not get into tune. And as you all know, Rabbi Damien doesn't like to play his instrument unless it is in tune. And so he kept tuning it, and he was showing some frustration, but he persevered, and it finally got in tune. And he played the song, and it was beautiful and touching and moving. And then we moved on. That location is kind of in the valley. It's like kind of on the side of this valley. And so then we went back up to the top where Yad Vashem, the museum, is. And we we get out of the bus, everywhere you go, you got to try to keep herding the cats and keeping everybody together and trying to get out, get out here, get in, get out. And so we get in, and we there's one complete building just as the welcome center. It's huge. We just quickly got through that because you do have to go fast, right? You got to cram. You're cramming in so much stuff from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's non-stop. And so we get in and we find a little spot. There's a tree with a little shade. Shlomo gets in the shade, and he's got us around him, and we all have headsets on. He has a microphone so we can hear him. Down there in the valley with the community remembrance area, there was nobody. Like maybe one little group came through, and that was it. Then we get up to Yad Vashem, and it's just crawling with people. So this is the eve of their Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron. And it was just crawling with people, just groups and school groups and this group and just tour groups. And so we found our little spot to stand and try to hear him talk about things before we go in. And he's standing there talking under the shade tree with his book in his hand like this, kind of just to the side like this. And he's talking. And out of nowhere, out of the sea of people going down the sidewalk area, this young lady, teenage girl, comes over and she says, "That book, my family is in that book. And she was speaking English, like American English. And he was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" She's like, "My family, this is my family in this book." And we were just standing there going, what? This young lady, teenager, was with her school group on a tour from Cleveland, Ohio. And she saw the book, and here we got to witness this young lady reunite with a family member she had never met before, standing right in front of us. She was from a line of, I think, a brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, of the great-great-grandfather. I think it was two greats. It's somewhere in here. It explains where she came from. I mean, she's not in here, but the line is. And he's the one that went to America and made it to America. He survived and made it to America, and so that's where she had descended from. And it was just remarkable, absolutely remarkable. We were in awe that we were witnessing this happen. The odds, we all were just kind of in silence for a moment, and then Dr. Eisner spoke up, and he's like, "What are the odds? What are the odds of something like this happening?" And then it just hit us all. That's why Rabbi Damien's guitar was not in tune. It needed to stay out of tune for a certain amount of time so that moment could happen. And it was just a glimpse of our lives. Every one of us go through times where we don't see the hand of God. We just see the hardship. We just see the trials. We just see the things that we're struggling to overcome. But there is a moment that God is orchestrating and his will is being done. And then the beautiful thing, we will get to see the answers to prayer. We just persevere and don't give up. So that was a most beautiful moment that we'll never forget. So we have the book, just so you know. We've got a copy, and if anybody wants to borrow it, you're welcome to read the story. I wanted to make sure this story continues to live on of this particular family. And do we have a picture of Shlomo and his... Oh, it's already up there. That's actually Robert and Terry Corin. They were on our trip, and they're watching online. So they're from Dallas, Texas, and we got to know them. Oh, the other girl. Does anybody know her name? Do you remember the... It was one of those, like her school group was going into they were leaving her. She was like, she wanted to talk to, her new relative that she met, but And she didn't even know that he was the author at first. She just knew that there was this connection. He's a family, he's in this book, he's part of this family. She didn't even know that he was the author until somebody caught up with her later and got her number, because it was one of those just, quickly happened, and she's like, my school group is leaving me, and anyway, she had to catch up with them, and it was just amazing. The other experience I wanted to share about real quick, when we got in, getting into Israel alone just felt like a totally different place than I've ever been. Then once we got into Jerusalem, that was an even greater difference, if you will. There was a peace there that I truly have never felt in a location. There's a peace that you might feel in prayer or in a worship service, but to go to a place, like a geographical place, and feel peace, I've never really had that I can remember. But I felt that coming into Jerusalem. And then we got to see, just riding down the streets, see children walking either in a small group or even alone, 7, 8-year-old little girls just walking alone with their backpack at peace. It was just the neatest thing to see. Like, that would not happen in Macon for sure. But even in small towns, that doesn't really happen in America anymore. Like, we have a fear, and we feel this need to not do things like that. Like, that's dangerous. But that was not the way it was. There was just this peace. And the other thing that was very unique was to see the unity. As you know, we have Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and then in Christianity, you have the variety there represented. But to see the unity and the respect that they have of one another is very unique, and something that I took away as to continue to keep an open mind and just to love one another the way the Israelis love the people, not just on their borders, trying to keep the peace, but the people within that they pass by on the streets every day. The last thing I want to share, and I know you guys it's not easy to sit there and listen to somebody else tell about a trip when you're just like, oh, this is either boring or you wish you could have gone and you didn't. I know that that's difficult to listen to one way or the other. But if you'll bear with me, I want to tell one more story. This, again, was a special tour in that because we were a Messianic group, we didn't go to the typical Christian traditional places. We did a few, but we got to do different things differently than a lot of other tours. And our guide, Shlomo, guides always have connections wherever they go, and they kind of have the way they do things. He had a connection with a place on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is remarkable. It's an amazing place to go and to stand and look. So typically, a tour goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Because what happened there, that is where Jesus went to pray before he was arrested, and had his disciples with him. And we visited the traditional spot of the Garden of Gethsemane, but we got to do something super special. There was a place right down the Mount of Olives. Got cemeteries all around, burial sites all around. And then there was this set of iron doors, and there was a sign on the outside that said, Franciscan Friars, the Hermitage of the Gethsemane. This is a holy place dedicated for prayers only. Visitors are not allowed. Well, our guide, again, had connections, and he got permission for us to go into this garden. Basically like a very private place that is run by Franciscan friars, and the friar there was Father Diego. And there was a chain. The chain lowers, the gates open, we get to go in. And then Father Diego, I took this picture right at the entrance. I turned around, and that's the path. This garden is full of olive trees. So Gethsemane, the word Gethsemane comes from the Hebrew word press. So And we read in the scriptures that this garden that he went to pray in was where they pressed olives to make olive oil. Whether or not this is the garden, we don't know, but it could very likely be. And this olive grove is maintained by this Franciscan order and by anybody who comes to volunteer and prune the olives, harvest the olives, make the olive oil. You can go and participate in that, and that was really neat. But we walked in, and the place felt completely different than any other place I had been. And it was a very special place. And just like Yeshua asked his disciples, tarry with me for an hour while I pray, we got to tarry for an hour. We all went to a separate place, found our own private spot. There's a rock under every olive tree and other places to sit too. And we got to sit and spend an hour in quiet prayer. And you could just feel that this is where he poured his heart out. He was pressed, pressed, pressed. He knew what was before him, and it was just a very special place and a very special time to seek the Lord and listen to his voice. And I think every single one of us left a different person after being in that garden. And I felt, just as we read, he was pressed and he asked time and again, Lord, let this cup pass from me. Can we do it a different way? And there wasn't a different way. He had to give up his life. And again, seeing that we in our lives go through things, we're pressed. We feel like everything that is squeezed out of us, how can we take this pressing? But we see that what's in us gets pressed out. And what got pressed out of Yeshua was his love for God, to obey his Father, even if it meant dying, suffering and dying, and his love for us. And that is what I felt in that place, was the greatest love. He loved us so much that he gave up his life. And it was a place of just love and peace that I have never felt before in my life. And to be able to sit there on that side of the mountain and look across at the Temple Mount and look at the gates, the eastern gates. Yeah, that's it. I took that picture through the olive branches, and you could just see this is where Yeshua is going to place his feet on the Mount of Olives. And he's going to, even though the Muslims created, those aren't the original gates, the Muslims created that, and they sealed it up to say, kind of as a slap in the face, like, we're going to do all we can to prevent things to come about that are supposed to be. But we know that there's nothing going to prevent Yeshua from returning, and those gates will be opened, and we will see the Messiah return. So thank you for listening and bearing with me through all of that. I'll give it back to Darren.
I'm going to skip a bunch of things and conclude with this. I'm going to go quickly these things real quick. If you'll hit slide 14. At various locations, we saw scriptures on many of the walls, scriptures such as this one, found on the stones of the retaining wall of the southern side of the Temple Mount. This is a passage from Isaiah 66:14 that says, "You shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, your limbs shall flourish like grass." This was written on these stones on the retaining wall on the southern side many years later. Could have been, I don't remember when he said, but probably Crusader times or something like that. Just the hope of the temples being rebuilt, and that kind of thing. We saw another place, scripture that says, the latter glory of the house shall be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, declares the Lord of hosts. And on the entrance of the Holocaust Communities Memorial, the one that we saw all the names of the communities, we saw another one that said, it was Psalm 78:6, that the generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise to tell them to their children. So they were, this is something we need to continually pass to our children. The part that wasn't on the scripture is interesting. Is verse 7. It says, so they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep His commandments. And so a lot of times that part is left out, especially from secular, Israelis that want to keep the remembrance, but we need to also remember that this is tied to that. So, being Gentiles, and I know I'm keeping you guys late, I apologize, Gentiles in Israel, home of the Jewish people, you can feel one of two ways. You can feel like a fish out of water, or you can feel at home. And Sabrina and I definitely felt at home, and I think a lot of the people in our group felt at home. There's a sense of awe, wonder, connection, and I want to conclude on this. And don't post any slides just yet, Blake. I'll tell you when to post it. But Messianic Jewish luminary Pauline Rose was a wealthy disciple of Avram Polyak from South Africa that moved to Israel with her husband during a very troublesome time in Israel's early years, just before the War of Independence. They wanted to be the first fruits of a return and rebuilding of and return to Zion. They chose Mount Zion to be the place that God had chose for His dwelling place. They chose it because of this. And they wanted to be at the center of what God promised He would do in the future. They wanted to be at the location from where God's blessing would go forth into all the world. And so they rebuilt a house from ruins on Mount Zion. It's at the top there, close to the Temple Mount. Over the course of several months, they ended up giving it a name, calling it Ha'ohel, the tent, as a connection to the legend of Abraham's hospitality, where he would invite travelers from all over to stop, to eat, to rest, to drink, to be refreshed, and he would bless them and tell them of the one true God. They created their home in the same spirit, to be a hub for people from all over the world to come and experience God's peace, God's joy, and God's blessing. They would invite Christians, Arabs, and Jews into their home to bless them and to dialogue about matters of faith. They would invite people out for Shabbat dinner. They would have them during the week for tea and so forth. But Pauline, she was from South Africa, and she was a visionary, and she wanted this place beautiful because God was restoring beauty to this broken land, and felt this is something that needed to happen. And so she wanted a jacaranda tree. I don't know why I'm tearing up on that word, but anyway, you'll figure it out here in a minute. She wanted a jacaranda tree, a tree native to her own past in South Africa, native to South Africa. She wanted it planted by her house on Mount Zion. Her gardener said, nope, not going to happen. It'll never work. This is not the climate, not the environment, not the soil. It's not going to work. It wasn't made to live in the harsh conditions of Israel climate, so forth, and it'd be a waste of money and a waste of time. But she insisted. And so she got the tree, he planted it, he cultivated it, nurtured it, and the tree not only survived, but it thrived. And Blake, if you can hit slide 11, and it's still there to this day. On the left is they just recently pruned it, but you can see the shoots coming off of it and new growth happening. And so we didn't get to see the big, lush tree that it has been. And then there's Sabrina and I beside it by the wall. This has special meaning for us. especially for Sabrina and I. Messianic Gentiles like ourselves find ourselves in a similar situation to this jacaranda tree, planted on top of Mount Zion. We've been taken from our native soil and planted in the soil of the Jewish people of Israel. And rather than taking our life and nourishment from the land of our birth, we receive it from the land of the King. Our spiritual capital is not Washington or Rome or wherever. Like Abraham, we are looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Hebrews 11. According to the metaphor Paul uses in Romans 11, Gentiles are not, Messianic Gentiles are wild olive branches who have been grafted into the root of Israel. We draw nourishment from Israel rather than replacing it. Either Pauline Rose or Brahma, I'm not sure which one, they said, we are bearers of the future. Messianic Judaism is the faith of the future. It is the higher order into which Judaism and Christianity will both be absorbed. This is not an arrogant statement, it's just sort of a matter of fact that the Jews have Torah, Christianity has Yeshua, and there the twain shall meet until us oddballs come along, right? We are the jacaranda tree planted on soil that we weren't originally attached to. And this is where we find our home. This is where we flourish. And I wanted to tell Shlomo before we left, because he commented several times about we're a different group, and I want to tell him, you don't know how different. There are people in our group that we will die with your hand in our hand, with Shema Yisrael on our lips, because we are like Ruth. Your people are our people, and your God is our God. And it will always be that way. Amen. So I want to encourage you as Messianic Jews and Gentiles. We represent something ancient. We also represent what God is currently doing in the world. And we also represent what God ultimately wants to do in the world, to bring redemption and godliness through holding on to Yeshua and holding on to the commandments. We are the people of the past. We are the people of the present. We are the people of the future. But we must reconnect with those of our past and present and pray for those who would come after us in the future. Shabbat Shalom.